When you draw a graph with sensitivities in the STEM 7.4 results program, the sensitivities are selected in the same dialog as the scenarios, and that's just like they are in the editor. So now I switch to the editor, and if you go to the scenarios and sensitivities dialog there, then in this context, when you choose what you're going to run, you choose whichever of the scenarios and or the working model you want to run, and then if you want to run a sensitivity on one of those things, you select the one you want here, and then this will be, if this is checked, this is added to whatever you're running. So if I run the working model, it means do sensitivity 1 on the working model. Okay, so in the yes, that's right. So then the inference is that whichever you select is added to which of the corresponding scenarios you're running at the same time. I think that's what I just said. When you draw a graph in STEM 7.5, consistent with the new look interface, sensitivities now appear on their own separate tab. So if let's imagine we're going to draw MPV. So if I select network and don't have those, when this is finished I wouldn't need to select anything here and it would just assume network. I'll go and pick my favourite graph, network MPV, and again for scenarios, when it's finished, if there's nothing here it'll assume working model, but I'm not sure if that works yet, so I'm going to actually select it explicitly. And basically in this new interface the sensitivities are shown in a separate tab, just because it makes more sense the way this works for that to be the case. So if I wanted to draw my sensitivity 1, I'd select it here, and the behaviour is exactly the same as before. You're simply selecting them in different tabs. So having selected sensitivity 1 here means that for each of the selected scenarios it will generate the corresponding sensitivities. So exactly the same implication, and with it just like that, then I click OK, and so by default it's going to give me a time series graph, and it's going to think about it for a bit. Down here you can see it counting up all the iterations, and this part's a bit slow at the moment. So here we are, this is the time series version of the graph, the not very useful one, and just like in STEM 7.4 you have to choose whether you want to have a time series graph or a snapshot or a tornado, and hopefully it's now rather intuitive that when you can do the same thing. You pick your network, you pick your graph, MPV, you pick your scenarios, and then once you've said all these things, sensitivity, then on the format tab this is where you're going to choose, actually I don't want a time series, I might want to have a snapshot, and that looks like this, or I could do the same thing again, and all these things, the elements, the graphs, the scenarios, the sensitivities, and then on the format tab I could say, actually I want to draw a tornado this time, and well, it's going to draw a tornado. Now Stuart's well aware that the tornado isn't quite right, because it's supposed to be sorted to have the biggest bar on the top and the smallest bar on the bottom, so it's something not quite right. The numbers look right, the parameters appear to be with the right data, they just aren't being sorted correctly at the moment. But anyway, so you draw your tornado chart very much like you would have done before. So this is probably actually the easiest tab to understand compared to how it used to work. And then just to go through some of the specifics, so when I'm going through here, then to be consistent with how the other tabs work, then in the sensitivities tab, if actually you have nothing selected, or if you have something selected and you have checked the temporary disregard selection box, which is going to be here eventually, then if there's nothing either selected or inferred to be selected, then you'll simply get the whichever basic scenario or working model results you've got. So that's entirely consistent with the others. And the separate graphs thing here means for the sensitivity, and so when it's not checked you get all of your sensitivity results on the same graph. So you have your tornado all together or your time series all together. If you were to check separate graphs here, then you would get a separate graph for each different sensitivity, and to be honest with you I can't think of a time when I'd actually want to do that, and we might even want to build in a warning, because that could actually be an awful lot of graphs, because the sensitivity wraps up n parameters times m steps, and that could be actually a lot of implied charts. But when the interface is finished, of course, let's not forget, it will be reporting over here just how many series you're going to get per chart and how many graphs you're going to get up here. So in a sense, checking this, you'd suddenly see the number up here going to be very big, so you would get some warning. So yes, so the separate graphs, either they're all together or they're separate. So you might think, well, what's slice about? Well, you might even think, well, what's more than one sensitivity about? And the answer is, well, if you've actually picked two sensitivities, then just like in STEM 7.4, if you pick more than one sensitivity for the same graph, it just combines them, so it would look at the sensitivities for the parameters in the first element as well as the sensitivities for the parameters in the second. So doing them all together means that if you picked your elements and your graphs and your scenarios and your sensitivities, there's a bug here to do with the OK button not being enabled until you've been across this in the right order. But ignoring that, then you pick all of these and then you draw your graph, and let's make sure it's still set to tornado because that's not sticky yet. And now, when it thinks about it, you will get a bigger tornado, which will simply have two sets of parameters, and again you can see it's still not sorting it. So that's what it means to have them together on one graph. And if you, instead of doing that, if you went and drew the same graph again and you picked your elements just because of the OK not being enabled in graphs, scenarios, sensitivity, if you got to here, you can't actually do it yet because it's not enabled, but if you checked separate graphs, then you would get two separate tornadoes here rather than one combined tornado. And again, you can't use slice yet either, but if you did, it would work just like the others. So if you had said slice here, then you would get a tornado for whichever one of these was currently selected. So you get a tornado for sensitivity 1, but on the tornado chart, if you imagine, here's your tornado chart, and here's the one for which is currently for sensitivity, whichever one it is, and there would be a drop down here where you could then switch between sensitivity 1 and sensitivity 2. That's not implemented yet, but it should be by the time we release this. The other thing to say, and I think this is the last detail, is that you can also do comparisons against sensitivities. So if I draw the same graph one more time, if I go graph and network, and we have network MPV, and we have working model, and we have the sensitivities, then let's just go back to having one. And if I decide to do a comparison chart, so let's pick baseline, that's the only thing it offers, and let's pick an operation because otherwise we won't do anything at all. So if I do a difference, and I'm going to do this still as a tornado, then what are we going to get? Well, the baseline, so this is for difference against sensitivity baseline, basically means that rather than getting a tornado with the actual baseline results in the middle, it's going to have 0 in the middle, and this is now showing me a tornado saying how much more or less compared to the baseline results do those sensitivities give me. So it's still a comparison against base, it's just that base has a very specific meaning when you use a sensitivity, which is that it knows already to pick out the original working model or scenario results compared to all of the different sensitivities. And as I say, it's basically the same functionality as we had before, it's just presented slightly differently and with a few more options that you didn't have before. So I don't think there is anything more to say about that, and this video is slightly confusing because not everything's implemented yet, but hopefully it's familiar enough that you'll still be able to imagine how it would be working when it was all done.